Okay, it's recording now.
Oh, well, that's good. I'll tell you what to do. When you're done, when you leave the meeting, don't shut down your computer because it'll be doing stuff for a while.
Okay.
Once the window goes away, you can shut down. Okay, great. Enough. So you're the one recording, not me. That's good.
Yes.
All right. Hello, Reverend Vivian.
Hello. Welcome. My sincerest apologies. I manage to mess this thing up every so often, so.
I think Marcia and Sharon are going to be waiting to get in shortly, so just keep your eye
Okay,
out.
I'm watching. I don't see anybody.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here tonight. It's good to see everyone. I missed the little bit of quiet in meditation before giving the Dharma talks, but here we go. I have to confess that over the last couple of weeks of reflecting on this talk and considering what I might say, I kept thinking to myself, there's no reason to give this talk because these people know this stuff already. I don't have anything to say to them that isn't something they've already heard. And then I was listening to a talk by Norman Fisher, who is a wonderful Soto Zen teacher who came out of San Francisco Zen Center. Really admire and respect him a lot. And he gave this beautiful Dharma talk, and then he said at the end, "Now, I know you all know everything I've already said and that I haven't said anything new." He said, and I was just so relieved that this great teacher, could say that. He said, there's so many books these days and there's so much on the internet. We have access to it all. We don't really need Dharma talks. But then he said that, this training and this practice, it takes a lifetime. And it's never over. And we need to keep coming back to it. And we come back to it in very simple and everyday ways. And so hearing it said again doesn't hurt because we keep it, each time it's repeated, we go deeper with it and we take it back to our lives more deeply and completely and fully. So I was encouraged by that. So you already know what I'm going to say, but I'll say it anyway. I was talking to a friend of mine a while back, and she told me about her experience at the Vietnam Memorial. She ended up at the memorial on Memorial Day by accident, having never been there before in Washington. Most of you are probably aware of how powerful that memorial is. And she was just blown away by it. And she's walking around it and finds herself in tears. And she has this recognition. I too am responsible for this war. And she was a Vietnam protester, out of that age when we were out there marching in the streets. So for her to say, I too am responsible for this war, really stopped me short. Now, I should backtrack a bit and say, just in case, I think you all know this, but I'm talking about bearing witness tonight, bearing witness, the power of our presence, okay? So that's the first story. And then a few days before the inauguration, I was talking to this same person, and she was talking about how she was going to watch the inauguration, and I said, I'm not going to watch it. I think I'll just listen to Biden's talk later in the day. I don't want to see all that stuff. And she said, given what happened at the Capitol, the breaching of the Capitol, she felt it was really important that she bear witness to the inauguration and that she be there to see anything that might happen. And again, I was really struck by that observation and really the power of this person's training and where it was leading her. And it was really because she talked about bearing witness to the inauguration that I decided to talk about it tonight. So you can blame her. She's responsible. Now, Another story. I read a while back of a group that works in schools teaching tolerance in schools. And one of the things they were trying to deal with was bullying. And they taught teachers and students that when somebody was bullying, when anybody, an incident of bullying, what they could do would be any given individual could stop and go stand near the persons involved, the bullier and the bullyee, and just stand there and watch and not do anything else. And as others noticed this happening, others would join, and eventually a circle would form around the incident, and everybody would just watch. Nobody would say anything. It was a circle of silence and of love and support, really. And what would happen is the bullying would stop, of course, because it was being witnessed. It was being seen. It wasn't in the dark back corner, and it wasn't being ignored, as we so often can do when we don't want to look at something, or we don't know what to do, or when something's painful. I was really struck by that. Stop and see. Stop what you're doing and look at what's happening. So all it took to stop the bullying was not looking away. Now, another teacher that I'm fond of is Joanna Macy, who many of you probably know is an environmental activist and Buddhist teacher. And she began many, many years ago, back when we were trying to deal with nuclear waste. She began these kind of, I guess you would call them protests or sit-ins at nuclear waste sites out in the Nevada desert and places like that. And she would go there inviting others, and they would sit at the gates to these places. And part of her message was that nuclear waste was something we needed to be responsible for. It wasn't something we could just hide in the ground out in the middle of nowhere and go away from and forget. And this reminded me of my friend's sense of her too being responsible for the Vietnam War. Even though she hadn't fought, she hadn't supported it, all that. Joanna Macy was teaching us that nuclear waste needed to be guarded. We had created this stuff, and now we needed to be responsible for it. And the way to be responsible was to guard it, was to stay there so that we would notice if something went wrong. We would see it if the waste began to leak. Not see it with our eyes necessarily, but we would know that it was happening. And I was very impressed by this willingness to guard and to take care of and to see, to bear witness to the consequences of our actions. Now, bearing witness is, again, you may all know this, it's a hallmark of Bernie Glassman's Zen Peacemaker's Order. Bernie Glassman, another modern Soto Zen teacher who died relatively recently. And he used to lead retreats, which he called plunges, at Auschwitz, where they would go and they would sit in the camp and just be there as a way of bearing witness to what happened there. And he led street retreats where people doing the retreat would live on the streets with the homeless for a number of days and bear witness to the life that these people live, people whom we so often can walk by without looking at, who we can easily treat as subhuman, who disturb us and we don't want to have to acknowledge. And so in these retreats, you're with them and living like them to a certain extent. There's always the fact that you get to go back to a nice warm home when it's over, which makes it different. So, and as I said, bearing witness is really the centerpiece of Bernie Glassman's teachings. And I'll say more about that later. But first, I just want to say a word or two about the dictionary definition of bearing witness out of the mouth of babes. You know, dictionaries, I don't wisdom from dictionaries, but Merriam-Webster says to bear witness is to show that something exists or is true. Exist. So first of all, we bring something into existence when we bear witness to it. Exist or is true. We're with the truth. When we bear witness, we're staying with the truth. We're not avoiding it. And Merriam-Webster also says bearing witness is to make a statement saying that one saw or knows something. Okay, we saw or know the truth. And I don't know about, you know, everybody comes to the practice for different reasons, but one of the reasons I came to the practice was because I wanted to know the truth. And that was very compelling for me. And I thought that through the practice, I could find the truth. And so here we have support from Merriam-Webster that by bearing witness, we will indeed find the truth. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we really want to know? Do we really want to know the truth? And of course, the primary way that we bear witness in our practice is through our meditation practice. Really, meditation practice is bearing witness. We enter into a space of stillness and receptivity, which is to say that we stop and we see, like the teachers and students on the playground with the kids who are bullying. We stop and we see, we sit down, we're still, and we are present to exactly what is there at any given time, without turning away from it, without judging it or fixing it, without commenting. We just let it be as it is, and all we have to do is just be present to it.
I'll go pee-pee. Go on.
And this is what taking responsibility is.
I'll go pee-pee.
This is how we take responsibility for the Vietnam War, for the inauguration, for everything else.
Oops.
Okay, when did you last hear me? I see I got muted.
Just a couple of words ago. Oh,
Okay. All right, I'll just carry on then. So meditation, stop, taking responsibility. Meditation is also a situation under which we go to the places that scare us, to steal words from Pema Chodron, to what abhors you or repulses you even, makes you furious. In meditation, we actually walk towards them, metaphorically, as we sit still and don't do anything. So being with the breath, or with any of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, whatever meditation practice you have, in my tradition, we do something more like we don't have an object of our meditation, so we don't place the mind anywhere. We engage in what I would call something like choiceless open awareness. All our senses are open and we're just present to whatever arises in our experience. Whatever we're experiencing through the senses, whatever arises in the body, emotions, thoughts, feelings, memories, fantasies, whatever it comes up, future planning, we just sit there with whatever it is and with whatever is happening in our world. So this very meditation practice is how we bear witness, and it is simply the willingness to be with, to be with. And then in our practice, we bring our meditation into our daily life and allow it to permeate everything we do in our lives, from the simplest and most mundane to the most complex and august. And I have to say, that I find myself over and over again all day long asking myself, am I really here? Am I really here? And I notice how often I go to put something down, say I'm going to set my coffee cup on the counter. How often I look at the counter, my coffee cup's going there, and before I place it, I've turned and I'm looking at the next thing I'm going to do. Or I'm closing a door, and before it's closed, I'm moving on to where I'm going, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And I do that over and over again. And that's stepping out of bearing witness. So back to Norman Fisher, this training ourselves to actually be there all the time really is a lifelong process that requires us to come back in every moment, over and over and over and over again, day in and day out for years. Again, the willingness to be with. The willingness to be there for someone and be there for what's difficult in our world. Now, my subtitle was The Power of Presence. So I want to talk about that. Bearing witness is really being present to, right? So, first of all, what happens when we're present is disarmament. I think many of us are old enough to remember when disarmament was, all of the political talk in the world, because we dropped, atom bombs and we realized we could destroy ourselves, the whole planet, in 5 minutes, and we needed to do something. Disarmament in our practice means, we have a kind of habitual tendency to protect ourselves from others' suffering, or from our own suffering, or from the suffering of the world. And it can seem like a kindness to ourselves to protect ourselves from that suffering. But in fact, that's a hardening of ourselves. We have to harden in order to do that. And we alienate ourselves and we separate ourselves. And it deepens our fear to separate ourselves from others' suffering or from our own suffering. It deepens our fear. That might be counterintuitive, but we actually become more afraid when we're unwilling to be with what is. And it means that we harden the heart, harden our shell, grow walls that become thicker and thicker and thicker and more impenetrable. And all of this is ultimately to live in denial or in ignorance, one of Buddhism's great 3 poisons. A woman and her child begging in the street, or when we see a man mercilessly beating a dog, or when we see someone in a wheelchair, that's simple, or someone who's developmentally disabled, or we see on our TV screens usually a mass shooting or war dead returning home, or we even see something like fear glint across a child's eyes. Most of the time, many of us turn away because we can't bear it. We can't bear witness. And, I think that it would really behoove us to recognize that we experience what we cannot bear as painful because we love. Because we love, we care. Because we care, it's painful. And the impulse is to want to shut it out because we don't want to feel the pain. And because we love, we grieve, and we don't want to grieve. We don't want to hurt. And I'm really impressed by how much we don't want to hurt and how hard we try not to. But I can I can promise you, I can vouch to you that if we do turn towards it, if we do allow ourselves to sit in the middle of it, if we're sitting in, if the most painful emotion we can imagine arises and we're willing to just sit right in the middle of that fiery crucible, it opens up in such a way that we can actually relax because we're no longer fighting. We can put down our defensiveness, lay down our burden, relax. And bit by bit, the hardened heart begins to soften. As we stay present, cracks appear in the wall, and the wall begins to crumble, and the hard edges are rounded. And we soften bit by bit, and our tough skins become tender. And we can let go of the protection we think that the armor gives us. We let some light in, and we shatter open. And in that space, we can relax, we can be at ease. As I said, we can lay down our defensiveness, we can lay down our burden. And this opening is an opening into spaciousness, to boundlessness. And that spaciousness can hold anything without any difficulty, whatever it is and however awful it is. And truly, fear will dissolve in that spaciousness, as will the critical mind and the selfish mind and all that sort of thing. And of course, they come back, but then we do it again. We dissolve into this spaciousness, which is prajna, wisdom. And out of that, inevitably, sympathy for others, sympathy for ourselves, and compassion arise. So we have prajna, wisdom, and compassion. Oh, good. I'm getting a note that our meeting's been upgraded by the host and now we have more time. Great. Because I'm talking too long, so it's a good thing. In any case, let's see. Wisdom and compassion, okay? What we call the two pillars of Zen that work together mutually. Now, so that's what the result of our willingness to be present is. That's the power of presence. That's the power of bearing witness. And bearing witness transforms, as we saw in the bullying example. When we just stop and look, the whole situation changes. The bullying stops. When we sit with a difficult emotion, the difficult emotion dissolves or shifts and changes in some way. It's not solid, it's not fixed. It moves. Transformation happens. And when we sit in this way and we're truly present, meditation pivots into action. So meditation doesn't stay sitting on our cushion, a kind of physical stillness. It actually becomes action. And this is what Bernie Glassman taught in the Zen Peacemaker's Order. The Zen Peacemaker's Order, his order, had three major tenets. The first one was not knowing. Not to not know is to appear before things innocent and without preconception. The second one is bearing witness, which in fact is knowing, right? We know the truth when we bear witness. The third thing is taking action, because when we actually look and see what's there and listen carefully to what's there, an appropriate response naturally arises. We connect with and serve those who are suffering, including ourselves. So this simple act of bearing witness transforms a situation in such a way that we can actually see what's wise and compassionate to do in the situation, and then we can take action. So a simple example, and I'm quoting someone here. For those of you who struggle with going to see a sick or dying friend or relative because you don't know what to do or say, try just showing up and bearing witness. Often it's our own discomfort and the feeling of helplessness. And I think, that feeling of helplessness is very real in the face of suffering and pain. It's our own discomfort and the feeling of helplessness that we are avoiding by not going into these situations. Sometimes we forget that our job is not to fix the situation at hand, but rather to help lift the burden of the other person by letting them know we care enough to show up. In good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, it is important that we show up for each other. Just show up. When we don't know what to do, just be there. You don't have to do anything, just be there. And this is the gift of our presence. And I think it's the greatest gift, the greatest act of love that there is, to just offer being present. It's most intimate. We touch a thing with our attention, and it opens everyone's heart. Now, bearing witness does have a shadow side, and that is that it can be very easy to create an other with bearing witness. There's me and there's what I'm watching. So you end up with subject and object, or separation, or division. I'm okay and I need to help you. Any of that kind of sort of dualistic way of thinking or being. And that's something that I think it's really important to watch out for, because bearing witness means, I'm bearing witness of something else. So there's a me, a subject, and an object of my attention. And in that way, we can easily use bearing witness to spiritually bypass, to not have to feel the depth of our pain or our joy. So in bearing witness from the point of view of our practice, rather than observing the situation, we become the situation. We become intimate with whatever it is: disease, war, poverty, death, starvation, our own distress. So when you bear witness, you're simply there, you don't flee. But I think it goes a step further into this being the situation, not being with, but being in, living it ourselves. Because I think it's really important that we not distance ourselves, especially when we're afraid, horrified, or angry, and that we not turn away. And that is how we stop and see. So bearing witness is really to become one with and to recognize our interconnectedness. So that's something to watch out for and aim towards. Now, I find that I myself, and I suspect all of us, really, 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 really want to get away from what is painful. And I will come up with all sorts of machinations to accomplish that. But I should, and I've been talking about bearing witness in terms of staying for what's painful. But I think it's also good to keep in mind that we're bearing witness to everything. So we're bearing witness to what is joyful, happy, glorious, noble, great. You can find your own adjective, but we're bearing witness to the whole of humanity, to all of what we are, to our joys and our sorrows and our joys. So I will just end by saying that The power of bearing witness, the power of our presence is love. We actually, when we can stay and be within what is, we find ourselves sitting in a huge vat of the love of the unborn. A love which has always been there and always will be there, which has always held us and always will hold us. We are held. Thank you. So it's been interesting to talk. And while a chat thing has come in, I see, Maeve, you're still there. Okay.
Still there. I'm not going anywhere.
I was afraid maybe you were gone.
No.
Okay, good. Oh, and look, there's lots of people here. Wow.
The whole world has changed while you were talking.
It sure has. I hope some of that came through to people. And how do we want to proceed from here, Maeve? Do we want to break and meditate for a bit and then come back for discussion, comments, questions? I'd love us to have some discussion time together. What do you think is best?
Well, I have no idea how long they're going to let us continue as long as we want. I don't know what the status of the Zoom meeting is. So if you would like to do the discussion, your preference, actually.
There was a message from Zoom saying that we were going to continue. I don't know why, but there was an actual message.
Yeah, good. Well, but I didn't say how long, right?
It said unlimited minutes.
Oh, great. Okay.
So we have unlimited minutes, but Maeve, you need to stop the recording if we're going to go into a discussion.
I'll stop the recording.
Okay, thanks.